Hello and welcome to my channel. Today we have a drawing of a famous movie character. This is Jim Carrey as Ace Ventura, the pet detective, and this was done in a combination of charcoal and a black colored pencil, so let's have a look. In addition to that, I'm also going to be using a graphite pencil, and I'm only going to use the graphite pencil for sketching. This is a Staedtler HB graphite pencil. And like I said, first I'm going to do a small sketch. As for the composition and the paper is about 9 times 12 inches in size, and it's going to be a more or less regular portrait. I'm going to create a vignette, and as for the reference photo, I took one of the photos where he's on the phone from one of the opening scenes from the first movie, I think. I don't quite remember, but I think it's at the beginning of the first movie. So like I said, I'm doing the sketch, and I just liked this photo, so I decided to do a drawing based on it. And I like his goofy expression in it, although when it comes to Jim Carrey, there are plenty to choose from. So like I said, I'm going to be doing this in a combination of charcoal and a black colored pencil. And I'm starting to work with a charcoal pencil. I'm going to be using 2 charcoal pencils, but in addition to them, I'm also going to be using vine charcoal. I'm going to talk a little bit about that later. As for the charcoal pencils, I'm using a medium pencil right now to start working on the hair. And I'm being careful about the strokes that I'm using to draw the hair, which is slicked back, so I'm trying to follow the direction of the hair with my strokes, so that once I start blending, I get the texture right, because even when I blend it, some of these lines will remain visible. Now, what I also like to do is add a touch of soft charcoal pencil for the darker areas in that hair, and then I start pushing the charcoal from the darkest to the lighter areas using my brush, and that way I create some nice looking transitions, and later I can pull some highlights using a pencil eraser or a kneaded eraser. And now I'm moving on to the eye, which I'm going to do also in a combination of a charcoal pencil, the medium one and the soft one for the darkest parts of the eye, the pupil. And in addition to that, I'm also going to be using a tortillon. On the ear, I did a little bit of shading with a graphite pencil, but most of it is going to be again with charcoal. Because this area is a little bit lighter, my light source is coming mostly from the left side, so that side of the face is going to be a little bit lighter. Naturally, we're going to have a small reflection in the eye, and in order to make it stand out as a highlight, I'm going to have to shade around it. Just going to separate this area where the chin is and do a little bit more work on the hair on the right using the same approach, so paying attention that I make one directional tapered strokes which kind of connect in the middle, and I leave some of the lighter spaces in between, and then I push the charcoal towards those to give that fabulous hair more volume and shape. Already it's looking pretty good, but it's going to be even better once I add these darker areas using a soft pencil, and once I pull some highlights using a pencil eraser. So I added some value using a graphite pencil to the white of the eyes, just so that the reflection in the eye is the lightest portion of the eye, so that it stands out in contrast against the rest of the eye. And here I'm moving on to the nose and other facial features. So occasionally I can use tortillon as a drawing tool instead of just as a blending tool. When it has some charcoal on it, I can use it to pull some softer lines where I don't need as much value or as much contrast when I don't need a very clean edge. And now I'm using vine charcoal to shade the darker parts of the face, mostly around the eye socket here, and a little bit on the rest of the face, because I'm trying to separate the shadow side of the face from the light side of the face, and the lightest part of the face is on the left because of the light source, but we're going to have some reflected light coming from the other side as well. So the lighting is a little bit complex, but as long as I'm patient, it's going to turn out fine. Now, as you can see, I switched to a black colored pencil. These are Primo black colored pencils, but you can use any other brand. It doesn't really matter, as I always say. And the same goes with your tools, the type of tools that you're using. I mean, you could do a similar thing using nothing but a black colored pencil or a graphite pencil, but I just tend to prefer charcoal in combination with a black colored pencil. It allows me to work faster, and it allows me to shade the way I want to shade and to create the details and the textures that I like. So you can see how nicely the contrast is starting to show up on the left side of the face, or his right side of the face. And there's going to be a substantial amount of shadow here under the jaw, on the neck. So I'm going to make that darker. I'm going to leave it now. I just shaded it a little bit with some vine charcoal, but I'm going to be going over it with a black colored pencil as well. And I'm doing the other eyebrow now. The eyebrows, they usually need some additional work once I finish shading the face, because they usually end up being a little bit too thin, so I always need to add a few more hairs to make them a little bit wider, but I'm going to do that later. I don't want to make it look like they've been plucked. So I'm working on the other eye using the same approach. There's going to be less of a highlight here because it's in the shadow and the reflection is not that visible. So like I said, I think this is from the first movie, where the plot mainly revolves around the dolphin, the abducted dolphin, the mascot, and the other movie takes place in Africa. If you haven't seen these comedies, I strongly suggest that you do. Both movies are very, very funny, and Jim Carrey is a great comedian. This part of the hair is going to be just a little bit darker, but I'm going to be pulling some highlights on it as well. So now I'm going to shade the rest of the face using vine charcoal, but you can see that I'm kind of leaving some of the lighter areas, not going over them with vine charcoal. That doesn't mean that they're going to remain white, because I'm going to go over them with a brush. I'm using a soft brush here to push that vine charcoal around. So just a quick explanation for those who are new to charcoal. Vine charcoal is natural charcoal that comes in sticks of irregular shape. It's very soft, easily moved, easily manipulated. And charcoal pencils are made of compressed charcoal. They are quite a bit darker and they stick to the surface a lot more, so they can be a little bit more difficult to erase and blend. But when you combine these two, you can get some nice results. And you can get even better results if you go over it with a black colored pencil on top. And one of the main reasons why I'm using a black colored pencil on top for shading is because I'm just used to that technique. I used to work with graphite pencils, and I'm used to building up the value with using cross-hatching and a tapered stroke, and I still find that technique useful even now that I work in charcoal. So I'm doing a little bit more work here on the forehead. And on the right side of the face, or his left side of the face, which is overall a little bit darker. But the jaw, the chin doesn't look right just yet, so I'm going to need to do a little bit more work on it. And also a little bit more shading on the lower lip. And I kind of need to clean up the edge between the jaw and the neck so that I can kind of explain that better to the viewer. I also added a little bit of compressed charcoal under the jaw there to further separate that in terms of value. Here I actually forgot to turn on my artificial light, so my light source is coming from the right, it's coming from my window. So there's a little bit of shadow from my hand, but hopefully it won't last too long before I switch back to my usual lighting. I think you can still see what I'm doing, and you can still see most of the detail. Occasionally, when I feel like I've produced too much texture with a black colored pencil, I can just soften that using one of my brushes. And I'm also adding a little more value to these sides where the shirt is going to be, so that I can kind of define the edge of the face a little bit better. Here I pulled some additional highlights on the hair using a pencil eraser. This is a Kohinoor pencil eraser. It's just regular eraser in a pencil that can be sharpened. So I think I'm pretty happy with the hair at this point, and I'm going to be moving on to the face. I use that same pencil eraser to pull some highlights on the face to kind of emphasize the shape of some parts of the face, even though the face still needs a little bit more shading and a few corrections here and there before I can be happy with the likeness that I've achieved in my portrait. So I'm just adding a little bit more value on the lower part of the face and on the right side of the face, and doing a little bit more shading on the neck and the chest here before I move on to his clothes and the hand. So here I'm moving on to the shirt. I can't really make out the pattern on the shirt. It has either a tropical or some other similar theme. But I'm just going to first establish some darker values there, and then I'm going to pull some leaf-like and flower-like shapes on it, just to make it sort of look like what I see in the movie or in the reference photo. So I'm just adding a few more darker bits to the shirt to give it a little more depth before I move on to the right side where he is holding his the phone here, and on the phone, on the receiver, there are a few nice highlights and some nice transitions. So there are some very dark areas here. And I also needed to clean up the edge a little bit. Now moving on to the hand. I'm trying to finish my drawing at this point, but I have to be patient because I can't oversimplify the hand, because that would ruin the overall impression of my drawing. So I'm going to do the same thing with the shirt here on the right side. I generally tend to simplify things when it comes to clothes because I'm not particularly interested in them. I like to focus on the faces and other details, so I tend to simplify and sometimes even oversimplify the clothes, but I'm going to try to give it some shape and make it look realistic, but I can't really make out the design and the pattern in my reference photo, so I'm just going to do the same thing that I did on the left side. Just gonna draw some lighter shapes and hope that it kind of looks like the shirt from the movie. And he also has a watch around the wrist, so I'm gonna kind of try to shade around it to make it stand out. Here I pulled some gentle folds on that shirt that he's wearing, and I'm just emphasizing the shadow here on the chest and cleaning up a little bit before I move on to the hand. So I'm doing some shading in between the fingers, trying to separate them, trying to create a clean edge there, and to shade those fingers to give them more shape. For this I'm also going to use a combination of charcoal and a black colored pencil. There's not too much detail in there, I just have to define the fingers and the knuckles. But the rest of it is going to kind of fade towards the bottom of the paper because it's a vignette. I'm just adding a little more value to the receiver because it's in the shadow, and trying to clean up some of the edges on these nails here and stuff like that. Pulling some more highlights and adjusting the shape of the nose, and maybe a few more highlights on the forehead. Just gonna clean up this edge here on the neck a little bit because there's a lighter area there, and maybe add a little more shadow in between the fingers. And that's it. This is the finished drawing. I'm gonna sign it on the left side for a change because I feel it'll be a little bit more balanced that way. I hope you like this portrait of Ace Ventura. Give me a like, subscribe, leave a comment, and don't forget to check out my other videos because I have plenty of other stuff. Thank you for watching, and I'll see you in the next video.